All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Nicole Casperson. I am the founder of Fintech is Femme, a media platform elevating human-centric companies and leaders changing how financial systems work. I'm so excited to be here today. We are talking about how in our post-pandemic world, digital access for all has become even more important than ever before, and identity providers have become central and crucial to Fintech's ability to welcome and service their digital consumer. Today, customers expect more and better tools from their providers, and the bar has been raised really high. So we're going to talk through how biometrics is a key to solving some major friction in fintech. And be sure to ask questions in the chat. We definitely want to be able to keep this engaging. So if you do have something that comes up, throw it in there and hopefully we can get to it right away. Also excited to introduce Dave Pope from Mitek. Dave, want to give a little about yourself?
Yeah, hey, good afternoon, Nicole. My name's Dave. I have been in identity and fraud prevention and money laundering, or the prevention thereof, and customer onboarding for about 20 years. Been lucky enough to been involved in a couple of startups that really made it in the identity world, that pioneered identity checking right from the advent from traditional database checking through to the advent of document validation and through to where we are now in terms of orchestration and smooth customer journeys and authentication. So I'm a bit of an identity geek, I'm afraid.
Yeah, at 20 years, I mean, one, congratulations. I feel like you should throw a party for that. And I mean, that's a long time, right, to be in a space. And then I feel like you've also gotten to see the evolution, right? This from whatever like the early on discussions were to what we're seeing today, which is a little bit more mainstream and a part of everyday culture.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's changed the world. The identity world has changed so much since then, from the early days of just checking a name, an address, a date of birth, an SSN, through to KBA, through to document validation, through to biometrics, and the fintechs, the banks, the markets have matured massively now. They're more demanding, as well as their users being more demanding as well. So really now, it's all about one API, easy orchestration, easy configuration, and a smooth customer journey. And that's why we wanted to talk today, right? To talk about how the identity providers are so central to all that from the fintech's perspective, and how we've got to be in our A game and really bring so many facets to the user journey on behalf of our clients, the fintechs, the banks, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into it. When it comes to really first of all, look at all these questions that we are going to get through, right? Some of my favorites on here that we're going to hit on: low code, no code, and what that means for identity verification, a huge element. Some of the stats that we're going to get into that might surprise you around fraud and password usage, or password hygiene, which is a new word that Dave has taught me, which we'll also talk about. So excited, but here's just kind of like a roadmap of what some questions that we will answer.
Sounds good.
But yeah, so the first one, I think community is so important. I think that today tech providers and their users are looking to certain communities to be able to solve these like very specific problems. So what is the responsibility of the biometrics community when it comes to addressing this skyrocketing fraud that we're seeing increase, honestly, year over year?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's like so many different ways to answer that question. I think the first thing to say is that when we talk about the biometrics community, that's now not just the identity providers like Mitek, but biometrics is very much at the heart of the fintech journey. And so the fintechs are very much part of that community now. And so between the identity providers and the fintechs, our first responsibility is human-centered identity journeys. I know, Nicole, you like to talk about human-centered finance. likewise at Mitek, always try to put the user right at the heart of what we do. And what that means really in terms of biometrics is delivering the most amazing experience with great UI and great UX. And the reason for that is that it's incumbent on us to make biometrics easy to use. We must make biometrics free of bias. We must make biometrics so that everybody can get through the process, get across the finishing line. The easier that we will make biometrics easy to use, then the more people sell through the process, the better it is for our clients, the fintechs, and of course, the harder it is for those other people, the fraudsters.
Yeah, well, and kind of to your point of, if there is that friction point, a user will abandon the process of working with a fintech or a finance app, if you will. So what are some examples of bad biometrics UX that you've seen fintechs and banks, I guess, almost like come victim to?
Yeah, so really biometrics in terms of the digital journey, biometrics for online banking, fintechs, online gambling, etc. That really only came in the last 10 years. But the worst journey I ever went through actually predated that, and that's where I was trying to get a payout and their process to make sure it was the real person that owned the account that was there transacting. They put in an email that said, "Can you write this number on a piece of paper and hold the piece of paper up to the webcam and show your face as well?" And that's just dreadful. That's that needed reinventing. And obviously now facial biometric comparison is very much there. But again, in the early days of that, sometimes you did see some ugly implementations of that. I remember there's one time when I went through the process, took a selfie, but the UI presented it back to me with my face turned upside down. So the face detection recognized my beard as my hairline and my forehead as my chin. So, but anyway, look, the gentleman never tells, so I can't say who that was with. But coming back now to the modern day, the bad journey, the bad biometric experience, bad biometric UX that I sometimes still see now is gesture-based liveness detection. The one whereby you have to look up, look down, look left, look right,
yeah,
look all around.
I've done this.
Yeah, and that's not where we're up to as an industry. Passive liveness detection is where it's at. None of this gesture-based liveness. So great experience for the humans to succeed with the biometrics. I mean, what's the worst one you've been? What's the worst one you've been through then?
Yeah, I mean, when I definitely have an experience with doing the kind of left, right, and up and down, and that actually is with social media. I got pretty angry at at Instagram because I get hacked a lot, or I get copycat accounts, and so I try to do the biometrics so that they can verify my identity, and they constantly ask me to do that, and I've done it multiple times, yet I still have people copying my identity on social, and it's pretty frustrating. Like, how do you already have my biometrics and you're still not able to to stop these fake accounts from popping up? And it's detrimental to me and my business, and so that's one of my kind of least favorites. That's just social media. I mean, imagine that in a finance situation, right, whether it's your password or your biometrics isn't done right, now you're really messing with someone's livelihood.
Yeah, where there's more at stake, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. I mean, okay, so I do want to talk about some of the statistics, if you will, out there. They're pretty alarming, and I feel like, yes, I love this slide. I feel like I'm guilty of so many of these, particularly the reusing of a password that's exposed in a data breach. It's almost like we've become so desensitized as users to our personal information possibly being compromised that we don't even feel the need to properly change our passwords.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me what's the responsibility of the biometrics community. And I think the other way to answer that question is that we've all got to accept that checking a database to confirm a name and address and date of birth, or going through KVA when users forget the KVA details within 6 months of signing up, those processes are no longer the defense they used to be. And the same is true of the password. This is something that, this is where the battleground is right now. This is where the weakest link is right now when it comes to the skyrocketing levels of fraud that you're talking about. I mean, a couple of stats to pick out from here. Takeover fraud increased by 90% in 2021 alone, 307% over the preceding 3-year period. And what really kills it for me is that 64% of passwords exposed in 2021 breaches were reused. So it's fair to say that in Mitek, we're not a fan of the password. If I told you that over 23 million accounts worldwide use 1234566 as their password, would that surprise you or horrify you, or a bit of both?
Oh my gosh, it just both. I can't decide yet how shocked I am by it. I think there's this assumption as our world becomes more digitally savvy, that as users we somehow also adapt to having the hygiene, right, to kind of, or password hygiene or digital hygiene, if you will, right, to be able to evolve alongside all of the technology that we're getting to our faces. But that's simply, not the case. When, I know for me as a fintech nerd, I love my multiple apps. I got my banking app, and then I kind of got my more traditional banking app that my mom made for me when I was a kid, and then I have all these different, I got my credit cards on a different place, and to be able to connect all of those seamlessly, honestly, the process is still so not frictionless. There's still such a hard element to that it hinders me from wanting to open more accounts. Even if it's an app that I find interesting and new and I want to be involved with, I'm like, oh, no. Now I have to go through the whole process of remembering my passwords and plugging them all in. And if I don't remember them, then I have to change them all. And it's just it becomes this mountain of stress that I don't even want to touch and deal with. So then you're just losing people right there. Why is fighting fraud even more important in the current financial climate? I mean, there's so many elements here. Not only are we in, a down market, right? So much recession talk. I think that, now users are just even more, just the fear, right, is heightened. So how are we addressing this?
Yeah, so in a down market, it's always more dangerous for fraud when some people don't have enough cash to make ends meet. There's traditionally a spike in financial crime. So that's the time when the fintechs, they've got to tune up their fraud tools. When their top line is a little bit depressed, they've got to protect the bottom line even more. There's a saying I've heard from fraud managers over the years, that at low tide, that's when you've got to work a little bit harder. When the tide is out, it's easier to see all the wrecks on the foreshore. So that means what they mean by that is it can be easier to find the frauds when the overall volume of transactions is lower. So I think, it's doubly more important in volatile times like this.
Yes, and kind of thinking back to the passwords before we had our short break, the thought of 64% of exposed passwords are used again, how does that kind of tie into this question, if you will? Because I think that there's still that education element, right, for the user, and it's is it on the fintech to talk to the user for that? And how do you maybe help fintechs and banks, actually perform that comms?
I think fintechs and banks are pretty good at doing that themselves. Actually, I don't know what it's been like for you over the last 12 months when you've been using your apps, but I now see many more warnings when I'm about to make a large transaction, transfer a large amount of cash, than I ever have done so before. of course, every time that Mitek is talking to the market, to our clients about fraud, about identity verification, that helps bring it further up everyone's agenda. But I have to say, I think fintechs are pretty good at doing that with their users themselves. And in fact, a lot of the differentiation you see from fintechs comes with them saying, right, what are the features can we build? How can we differentiate? How can we look after our users' financial interests better than the incumbent banks are doing so? That said, I think there's a danger that banks will catch up as soon as we'll catch up to fintechs. As soon as banks got over the notion that everything had to be on premise, as soon as banks realized that they could buy in really good UI and UX from identity providers, then that's the point at which fintechs are in danger of losing their differentiation when it comes to that really smooth digital experience. So I think that certainly now, we could see banks slowing down the market share that fintechs have taken away from them and catching up on the fintechs.
Yeah, well, and it ends up also hurting fintech's mission, right, of increasing access and inclusivity, right? Because if they're not able to properly get to the root of the fraud problem, or even just the friction with the UX, then you're not only are you possibly letting bad actors in, but you're also losing good customers. And that is not what we're about, right? So this does perfectly kind of jump into biometric bias. Talk us through what this is, and yeah, we should just start there.
Yeah, so you're right. It's a constant balancing act, balancing that equation between compliance and convenience. And in the early days of biometrics, I'm not so sure that biometric bias was something that was considered from the very off. Of course, identity providers like Mitek have always been very, very focused on bias in biometrics and liveness. But I have to say, I don't think the fintechs have been quite so quick to get onto that. Fintechs love to scale. Fintechs, historically, in my mind, have been the first question is how many people will pass this process? How many people will get through? And I did a webinar last year with FinTrail. They're financial crime consultants, great guys, and we did a poll on the webinar, and we asked the attendees if they knew how their biometrics and liveness provision performed across different demographics, such as age, gender, ethnicity. And I think if I share that slide, these were the results. And I was blown away by how few of those fintechs knew how their current biometric provision performed across those different demographics. And that's something that's so important now, that fintechs didn't know that. That just really blew me away. And obviously, I'm sure you're saying, well, how does Mitek stack up? So,
right.
So the biometrics and liveness technology behind the Mitek journey, it's tested and analysed by NIST. That's basically the National Institute of Science and Technology. It's part of the US Department of Commerce. And we'll happily share the results in detail, at a later date with any of your lovely audience. But just to give you a heads up, our maximum demographic bias across ethnic origin, gender, and age is less than 0.5%, and so that's right up there. That's the very best you can get.
I mean, so this graph that we're looking at, which I'm like ready to screenshot because it's pretty alarming. This is showing us that fintechs are not, essentially, they just aren't paying attention to their biometric provisions that are in place, but they just don't know actually how they're performing. Do they just like let it ride and not do anything about it typically?
Yeah, I think they're paying attention to it, but if you like, they're paying attention to the top level stat, not the layer of performance stats underneath it. So they're paying attention to how many people can get through the process, but they're not paying attention to the different demographics within it. And the identity industry moves very, very quickly. This is back in October, so I think we might see a different number now if we were to do the survey even again.
Right, and this is something that, yes, I was gonna say, exactly. Like, is this kind of almost like level of access? This is something that obviously you, and with Mitek, like addressed this direct issue here. Like, how is that done?
So I think it's definitely another area that's ripe for improvement. We also did a poll on that same webinar, asking fintechs if their account opening and their account servicing journeys were optimized for accessibility for visually and physically impaired users. And the stat was pretty much the same, actually. Again, lots of work to be done here, improvements to be made. 15% compared to 14%, really.
Yeah, like exactly. This isn't the best look for us as an industry wanting to increase accessibility, right? We like throw around the word like democratizing a lot, which is kind of whatever. But regardless, if that is something you fundamentally are trying to do, and you work in a fintech company or founded one, and you aren't putting this in place, then you aren't necessarily putting your money where your mouth is, essentially.
Yeah, and there's so many little things you can do as well. So whether that be screen reader optimization, so that means that the code on the page matches the logical order of the information when it's presented in the reading order. So the screen reader is presented with the information in a logical process. Or for users, for physically challenged users that can't use a mouse, for example, focus indicators. They help the user see which UI element has the keyboard focus when they're tabbing across instead of using the mouse. Or perhaps for users with motor neuron or neurological disorders that cause fatigue, you've got to make it easy for them. You've got to make it possible for them to stop and start, save where they're up to, and come back later. And of course, that kind of like little accessibility measure, that's good for everyday users as well. The people that have to go and feed the kids, and so on and so forth. There's all these little things that identity providers need to pour into the journey. So all these little considerations and permutations that it's incumbent on us to provide, because our clients don't necessarily look at it in that detail. They want to be financial services providers. Another small but effective thing is to serve the UI of the identity process in the language of their choice. So perhaps you could detect what the default language is in the browser, and then automatically render those perhaps complex KYC instructions back to the user in that language, so it's easier for them to understand. So there's many little things to do. In fact, I did read about a fintech that was specially serving a certain demographic, that was neurologically challenged. It was for elderly customers with dementia, and the whole proposition, not just the UX, was aimed at helping families living with dementia to safely manage their everyday spending. So I know these graphs paint a picture of perhaps not enough work being done on accessibility, but you do see some great differentiation in fintechs that do look after and serve those communities.
Well, and that kind of almost like niche serving of communities is also something that's still relatively new, right? Like to kind of level here, right? There's still all of the there's still the innovating, right? And the building and the product development and all of the elements, right? And then not to even mention, right, the pathway to profitability, which is even more stressful in today's current environment. So, I think this biometrics is really about that proactive versus reactive mindset that can be really helpful, and kind of going into that user experience again, right? We know that users today are fickle. I've admitted to being fickle as a user. They will walk away if there is any friction point. Honestly, one will make it happen. So how do you emphasize the importance of biometrics and the UX when you're talking with fintechs?
Yeah, I mean, coming back to your earlier question about the current environment, the other aspect of that is as fintech funding has contracted, people's runways are a lot shorter. So that means that abandonment and maximising the percentage of customers that get over that KYC finishing line, that becomes so much more important. So fintechs and their identity providers, they've got to be obsessive about the user experience. Our job at Mitek as an identity provider is digital access for all. And what that means for our clients is they want to maximize the percentage of users that get across the finishing line. So the only way to do that is create an identity journey that's easy for them to sail through. The expectation from the user is always real time. That's not always possible in the real world. Sometimes the user can't be validated in seconds. Sometimes the user might provide us with a bad image or a bad selfie, and in that scenario, we'll say, "Hey, look, this is what you've done wrong. Do this and try again." So that kind of dynamic feedback, the instant triage of what the user's done wrong, and dynamic feedback to them to help them through the process so they can succeed the second time round.
And okay, so you at Mitek have clearly thought ahead on all of these issues. So I feel like it's important to kind of get into some of the actions and the things that are, really available, right, to everyone. I think that there's just honestly like a lack of awareness generally on this. So what do you have? What is the secret sauce that makes Mitek stand out as the identity provider?
Oh, that's a very good question. The simple answer is that we think about journeys. Yeah, we think about identity in terms of the different KYC technologies, but we think about it equally as much about the journey from the end user's perspective. So we've spoken today about the KYC journey, both from the onboarding perspective and the authentication perspective, trying to kill off the password. This is our platform to help drive an amazing customer onboarding journey. It's called MyVIP, the Mitek Verified Identity Platform. And what we hear from our clients is that they want a wide range of identity services in one API. That's orchestration. Secondly, they want low-code, no-code deployments and a really easy, simple configuration process so they can go to market easily, quickly with new journeys and new KYC rules. And thirdly, their users demand the best UI, the best UX. So they're the three pillars basically to MyVIP.
And can you remind us and elaborate on that first pillar?
Yeah, cool. So orchestration really is the logical conclusion of the proliferation of different identity technologies over the last 5, 10, 15 years. And fintechs, they don't want to have multiple providers. They want one provider to bring in all the different technologies they need. And then they want to deploy those different technologies on the different users based on the risk that they see in that particular user. So they can start with database checks. They can then add in facial biometrics and liveness detection. They can add in PEPs and sanctions checks, digital footprint analysis, open banking, a user questionnaire process, an attachment gathering process for ancillary information. So there's many different components that our clients can consume and create different journeys. But orchestration isn't just picking which technologies. If you think about where the word orchestration comes from, the conductor, they're conducting the orchestra and making a lovely harmonious sound. And that's what we do as well. We try to make all these technologies work together in conjunction, in harmony with each other. So an example of that might be that the results of the initial bureau identity database check, that can then determine what subsequent KYC steps are required.
So this sounds pretty complex, and I would totally get why fintechs, and especially, a founder, honestly, regardless of stage, right? They're focused on so many other things. But I get why they would want low code, no code solutions here. So how are you addressing this? And maybe walk us through, for those that don't know, what no code, low code is.
Okay, cool. So this is really where Mitek stretches its legs. This is our secret sauce, our superpower, if you will, bringing the no code, low code approach to identity. So what no code, low code means for me is enabling people to do something, but without having to do all the hard work underneath it, all the clever coding. So a good example of low code, no code in our everyday working lives is Excel. Instead of having to program the calculation yourself, you press this button and it does it for you. Looking at a slightly more complex example, when you're about to do an e-newsletter to all your followers, you might use something like HubSpot. And there you don't have to write all the code, all the HTML for the email yourself. You don't have to write a complicated SQL query to decide who it's going to go to. You press a load of buttons in your platform, and it does it all for you. And so that's what Mitek is doing for identity and onboarding and authentication. We have all these settings and configuration options in the client portal that our clients can come in and play with and use. And that's so important because it means that they don't have to have developers behind them to code together different APIs, different identity technologies, different rules, different UIs, and so on and so forth. So an example of those is obviously orchestration. But moving beyond that, what we do is we allow our clients to create different journeys for different users using an identity confidence score. And they can say that customer A that is less risk, they only may need to get an identity confidence score of 60, compared to user B, who might be more risk. They have to go off and achieve an identity confidence score of 70, which means they might have to do more work, present more sources to attain that higher identity confidence score. We will also tell our clients if we think there's something that they might want to have a look at. So for example, if it's an insurance company and the user is applying for a policy and the age of the customer is less than X, they might want to have a look at that. Or let's suppose there's a geolocation mismatch to the address information that's being supplied, or let's suppose there's a match to their custom fraud history. So there's lots of clever rules, alert rules that our clients can set in the platform. And quite often in fintechs, there's sometimes a slightly tough relationship between the digital product managers and the compliance managers. In the platform, it's so easy to go in and create rules for your compliance manager, or you can give your compliance manager the power to go in and do that. They can create rules to say, don't let the user through the process if they try and present a driver's license with less than 2 months left before it expires. Or they might be able to create rules to say, look, if they're giving us a tax document, that's okay. That could be up to 11 months old. Or they can say, don't accept any of these nationality ID documents, or ask for a custom upload of the letter from their college to support onboarding for youth journeys or something. So there's lots of clever stuff that our clients can do there. And the other sort of thing is the journey. Not every client wants to make their own journey for the KYC pages, for the KYC process. So clients can pick and choose from our different journey pages and set those in the process. And also in terms of results as well, sometimes clients might have developers to use an API to pull the results back to their CRM, but equally clients can consume our results in our client portal download it to an SFTP or download it themselves, or manage rules to say, hey, if a particular user achieves this kind of result, then send it to this team over there to do a review on. So there's many things built into the platform that saves so much time for our clients. That means they don't need to wait 2 months, 3 months, 2 quarters until developers can come do that work for them.
Right. Well, and when you don't need, that kind of resource, right? When it's this simplified, one, it feels like, okay, there might not be any, excuse, right? And to not have biometrics a part of the journey and your business model, but also just, it feels like that opens up the access just for the type of fintech company that is able to incorporate this, right? Because not everyone has massive teams or resources or developers, or, not everyone even has a CTO, right? And so like manage that type of project. So
some fintechs use us for what they like to call waitlist, even before they've launched, or maybe they're launching a new platform, and they haven't fully plumbed in the KYC service. So they use our waitlist feature so that they then download a spreadsheet of everyone that's on the waitlist, and then that kicks off the KYC process for them. So yeah, even if you don't have a CTO or developers, there's so many ways that we help our clients get going.
And what about your authentication service?
Okay, so this is a new product that we launched end of last year, and it is going great guns at the moment. As I said earlier, passwords are weak, biometrics are better for many reasons, which you can see here on the screen. You and I talked the other day about password hygiene.
Yes.
And yeah, the fact that we all keep having to create passwords just forces us to be lazy in our password hygiene, and like we saw on the stats earlier, reuse our passwords or make passwords too simple. So this new service, it's called MyPass, and what this is multimodal biometrics. And let's suppose that you're a user, you're going through your application for that fintech. The fintech can say to you there and then, hey, do you want to have super secure biometrics on your account? In which case, enroll now. And what Mitek will do is we'll capture the selfie, perform liveness detection on it, capture a voice print, and perform checks to make sure it's a real live voice and not a recording, and then turn that voice into numerical biometric templates. Some of our clients want to store those templates themselves. Some of our clients want us to store them. But that's the enrollment process. And then when a user comes back, and it might be at login, or it might be at a high-risk trigger. It could be the user wanting to change their address, their email address. Before this kind of technology, what fintechs or banks would do is they would have to make that customer wait, send something to their home address, and make them go through this awful out of band loop. And now instead, the user can authenticate themselves straight away with their voice, with their selfie, and that means that fintechs can make those account servicing journeys so much smoother and actually much more secure as well. So that's the process. So quick and easy. Takes less than 3 seconds to enroll, less than 3 seconds to authenticate. And it's
that's
so
like how it should be. It feels like that's exactly what I should experience. I should be able to just be like, boop, oh good, it happened. Like, let me open another account. Let me do this. Like, yeah, it just it's like crazy to me that it's not everywhere already.
Yeah, we'll get there.
You're working on it. So, but yes, continue on. Yes, okay, so kind of centering around humanizing, right? The experience, and really centering around the individual. So kind of talking about that, how should providing identity be centered around the individual and personalization?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And for me, one size doesn't fit all. As the technology has proliferated, it gives fintechs the choice to deploy different technologies on different users. So let me give you an example about 2 different customers. We've got Nice Nicole from New York and Dastardly Dave from Dallas. So nice Nicole, she's applying for a checking account, no overdraft, and her bureau identity check data is good. So Nicole's journey is going to be liveness, ID document, and facial biometrics. But dastardly Dave, he presents much more risk. And that's first of all because of product risk. He's applying for a checking account with an overdraft and a credit card, but also his bureau identity check data has come back with a couple of fraud flags. So Dave's identity journey is different. Dave's identity journey will have liveness, ID document, facial biometrics, a utility bill address proofing process, and digital footprint analysis. So our clients can add more or less of the different KYC services based on the risk they see around the individual. So that really is human-centered identity because it's centered around each individual customer as opposed to one-size-fits-all process.
Which has been a huge problem in the industry generally, right? You know, when even from biometrics and identity providers to even just the services provided to small to medium-sized businesses, right? There's this like constant umbrella theme of, oh, okay, well, we'll put out fires with like a one-size-fits-all product offering, and so now we've entered this space where that's simply not a reality and isn't working, right? So we've had to figure out ways, right? And I think that kind of also goes back to that low code, no code, right? When you're showing us those different toggles, there's so much individualization that gets to happen, and you can customize it, right, for each scenario.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The danger of the one size fits all process is higher abandonment rates, because you're forcing some of your users to do more proofing, to do more KYC work than perhaps you need to.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, and the last thing we want to do is make users do more work when they're already in like a stressful, it can be stressful to you know, engage with your finances. And even if it isn't, even if you're just like, you're like nice, Nicole, and you're having a lovely time engaging with your finances, and then something happens that makes you not so nice and happy. We don't want to, you know, entice any of that, when we don't have to, right? When we have the technology to let everyone have a slice of the pie and everyone win. But yeah, so it's really, really cool to see this evolution and the capabilities that can happen now. I'm waiting for my fintech apps to have this, so that so I can stop being a fickle customer. But yeah, so wanted to open the floor for any questions for Dave or myself. Let's see, I believe anyone here can just kind of plug it into the chat. So if you have anything super specific, we are happy to answer those. And until then, I would maybe ask you, kind of thinking back, what do you think is maybe the biggest, like, is there a moment during your journey throughout working in biometrics where you were like, okay, we really can, you know, take this to the next level? Or was there ever kind of like a monumental moment where things really felt like biometrics can truly take over the password?
Yeah, I think that there's two things. I mean, obviously, what we're trying to do in the present, in the now, is to replace passwords with biometrics. You know, obviously, as a consumer, we hate them. I hate my horrible password reset processes. I think I seem to forget my passwords more than everybody else. They're too easily compromised. And yeah, to finish with a couple of stats from the clever folks at Javelin. So I think I said it earlier, account takeover fraud increased by 90% in 2021 alone, but 64% of people trust biometric authentication over passwords and KBA. So that for me is surely this is a tipping point now. And then the other thing is reusable digital identity. Where will we get to on that over the course of the next couple of years? I also think we're on the verge of a tipping point there now to be able to do that, whereby I, as a user, can port my identity from one use case, from one transaction to the other, without having to go through a new KYC process every time. So they're the two big things happening in identity right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Really, really interesting. And kind of, as we close out, I know that, you've really, really shown us how Mitek is working, right, to be the change that you want to see in the fintech space, which is this replacing of passwords for biometrics. But any other, parting thoughts or key takeaways that, the audience should kind of turn around and think for themselves as they continue on in their businesses?
Yeah, keep challenging your UX. I've been lucky enough to be part of conversations and big meetings with fintechs and banks in their offices, whereby literally every piece of wall space is used up with pieces of paper depicting different stages of the journey. And at Mitek, we're now working on the next generation of our UI, and I'd say the same to any fintech or bank. Keep working on the next version. What else can you improve in the journey? That stuff never stops.
And the never stops and the journey element, right? I think there's this like misconception that, okay, oh, we had a fraud problem, we'll fix it, and then that's the end of the journey. It is not. Fraud is a forever journey, and as we see the increases every year, but as technology gets smarter and smarter, so do bad actors. And so if we aren't collaborating as an industry together to combat that and also work together as the good guys, then yeah, we'll see banks outpace fintechs, or we won't be as inclusive as we want to be, and all the things that we're trying to avoid can trickle in and happen.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. So, Nicole, really enjoyed talking with you today. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Mitek, for all of the insight, all the information, and I feel like you are definitely more than open to being reached out to and answering any questions that anyone has, or even if they just wanted a taste of what the Mitek experience and product offerings are. So are your DMs open, Dave?
What, sorry?
I said, are your DMs open? Which is like, can people message you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. Here you go. You can reach me here.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you again so much for everyone who joined us. I believe that we recorded this and there should be some replay version available. I'll probably write about it as well in my newsletter to give some highlights from this discussion, but otherwise, appreciate everyone who showed up. And Dave, for taking the time. I always love nerding out about fintech and biometrics and fraud. So
yeah,
always happy to chat.
Cool.
Yes, cool. All
Thanks,
right.
Nicole.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.